today we're going to be talking about a really quick lecture on Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist. And in particular, we're going to talk about his definition of existentialism in his essay, The Humanism of Existentialism. Okay? And one of the big things that Sartre wanted to do when writing that essay was to try to kind of defend existentialism against many of the criticism it had, as well as finally give a really good definition to what it was. Many people kind of avoided the term, they didn't like using the term about it, but Jean-Paul Sartre came along and said, you know what, I'm going to be the existentialist, here's what it is. In doing that, though, he wanted to defend it against some criticisms that perhaps existentialism was more of an elitist philosophy, only one that you would talk about in the classroom when it doesn't apply to outside. As we'll see, existentialism has to deal explicitly with the real world outside. That's what he wanted you to know. The other thing is, he wants to defend it against the criticism that it's only about human degradation and despair and all these things. And though there are some dark things here, as you'll see, despair is written up over there as an important part of the theory, it's actually a very optimistic theory he wants to point out. It's not a pessimistic theory, it's an optimistic one. And the big thing he wants us to know is, of course, there is always choice. And this is one of his big ideas, that we always have a choice to be what we are. Okay? And that's the optimism side. I guess the best way to start this is to define existentialism, how he does it. And he does it in a very simple way. He says, existentialism is existence precedes essence. Precedes essence. Okay? Now, quickly we can say what that basically means is I exist before I have what I am. Okay? The best way, I think, to go about explaining this, though, is to do the same process Sartre does, which is kind of a negative process, where he basically says that this is what the human being is, but up until this point, typically Western philosophy has thought of the human being as the opposite of this, that actually thought of us as an essence precedes existence. And he want to show us kind of the ways in which that has happened, and the ways in which why that is so wrong. Okay, so let's put an X here and put what it's not, which is we are not an essence precedes existence, like many have thought before. And he wants to show us this place of what that would be. What would it be to be essence precedes existence? And hopefully by example, we can then show what it actually means to be the opposite of existence precedes essence. Okay. The first thing he says, well, we can think of ready-at-hand objects. Okay. So that's what I call them here. I'm borrowing a term from Heidegger here. Ready-at-hand objects. Those things, okay, are essence precedes existence. In the writing, he talks about a paper cutter. Okay, and he says it would be ridiculous to think about making a paper cutter before knowing what it is, what its purpose is. Okay, the inventor of the paper cutter doesn't create the paper cutter and then goes, what the hell do I use that for? Okay, or someone didn't invent, let's put away a chair. Okay, someone didn't come up with a chair before and they go, I made this chair here, now what am I supposed to do with it? The thing is, the purpose in mind is already there. The essence, here we go, the essence of what the thing is exists prior to the creation of it, before its existence. In the book, The Paper Cutter, here in this other example, the chair, right? Ready-at-hand objects are essence precedes existence. Some other places, and now we get to where the human being is thought like this, we can see it as God as creator. Okay? God as creator. And the point is this, is that when God created us, he created us with a reason. Okay? He didn't create us with no reason and just willy-nilly make us. He had a purpose for us. And therefore our purpose pre-exists our actual existence. Our essence of who we are in God's mind was there before I ever came into being. So before I'm ever born and do anything, who I am and what I am is already decided for me by God. Okay? And this is probably one of the most famous ways in which essence precedes existence, and as we'll see, one of the biggest ones that Sartre is trying to argue against. Okay? Another place we could even, after the death of God, which we'll borrow from a term of Nietzsche, so after the death of God, okay, which basically means that God is no longer a viable answer, okay, to who we are. But even after this, Sartre wants to point out there are still ways in which essence preceded our existence. For example, we could take a look at the Kantian understanding of reason, where he believes that human reason is what we are, and we are this before we're born, before we ever maybe even realize and are able to reason. That is what makes who we are. Kind of like the divine throne of reason, right? We could also even look at more of a scientized way, on which where biologicism becomes the main point, that the point of our existence is to reproduce, and that's our only purpose, and everything is thought through there. Once again, we have no choice in the matter. What we are is decided before we're born. What Sartre wants to point out is all these things, okay, are not what a human being is. These are wrong ways to look at it. And someone will say, well, what's wrong with looking at us as God's creator? He says, well, I mean, what is worse? To think of us as some type of object without any ability to choose who we are? What's better? He seems to want to put that we are the opposite. Okay, it's not something that we are this and we gotta have to become something already, which already pre-exists us. What we are able to do is to actually choose who we are. Okay, what he means by existence precedes essence is actually the fact that we are thrown into the world first, and we have no essence. There is no purpose for us. There is nothing here. And even if there was, as we'll point out, there's no way we can know it. Sartre, is talking about atheistic existentialism, but the idea still crosses in Christian existentialism. Even in Christian existentialism, if God exists, you can't know he exists. Okay? Basically, we're thrown into a world that we have no idea who we are, what we're supposed to be. And the thing is, what we are kind of endowed with is the choice to make who we are. That is why our existence precedes essence. We are first thrown into existence, and then our essence is chosen by us. And this is what he thinks is the first goal of existentialism, is not to think of us like this, like a mere object, which this type of thinking has done for thousands of years, he claims, okay? Really, you could probably go all the way back to Plato if we want to look at it that way, all right? Maybe even before then, okay? What we need to now is to rethink ourselves as choice, okay? As a being who can choose to become this, or this thing, or that thing, or the other. And basically a being which is open to possibilities, okay? And that's the first goal of existentialism, is to make us aware, as we'll see, of our own subjectivity, okay? So the first move, he says, of the subject of existentialism is to make us aware of subjectivity. And what he means by that, existentialism is supposed to make us aware of that we are existence preceding our essence, that we create who we are through our choice, okay? This is the biggest point, all right? Now, to go a little further, and I know I'm going this fast for time's sake, but just kind of stick with me here, all right? The next move after this, once we are aware that this is who we truly are, the next move is to realize that not only are we responsible for myself, because think about it, if I choose who I am, what excuses do I have, okay? I'm the one who made myself. I made this decision. I made that decision. I can't blame anyone else anymore for it. It's up to me, okay? I am totally responsible for who I am. And that's really one of my favorite parts about existentialism. As we get later into postmodern philosophy, almost sometimes the responsibility starts to disappear, at least in some philosophers. Here in existentialism, we see the responsibility is on you, okay, as a person to make who you are. No excuses. But he also says something strange in one of those paragraphs. He says, once we realize this, we have to also realize that we are responsible for all mankind, okay? Or we can think of it as all humankind. What in the world does that mean? He seems to say that when I choose to be who I am, when I make the choice of this is what I want to become, or this is the career I want to be in, or this is where I want to go with my life, when I make that choice, that I'm not only am I making a decision for myself, I'm making it for all mankind. Now, that's a very controversial paragraph, I think. And I believe he believes in what he's saying, but I think he might be taking a more metaphorical kind of approach to this. It's not as if that when I make a choice to be, let's say in my case, I chose to be a philosopher, and it's something I believed in and wanted to do. So far, it's working out, okay? I chose to do this. It's not that when I choose this, I am then choosing for every single other person that I think they must be a philosopher, and therefore I should tell everyone, you need to be a philosopher. What I think he's trying to make us aware of is that whenever I decide that this is who I am as a human being, that I am deciding what all human beings are. In my mind, it's almost a way of making this choice, of going, when I decide what it means to be a human, when I make that choice about my life, I'm deciding what it means to be a human altogether. And in my belief, I say to philosophy that I'm so behind this thing that I could choose it for all mankind. It in some weird ways reminds me of a Kantian kind of understanding of ethics, how he thinks about it, where we have to almost universalize it for everyone. If it's something I truly believe in, is it something that I could will for every other people? Though Sartre is much different than Kant. This is someplace that is kind of similar, but I don't think he means that every single one of us has to be it. For you, you may want to be a teacher, or maybe a nurse, or maybe a CEO of some business, okay? But his point is if you are behind it, you could will that for all mankind if you truly believe in it. If you don't, it seems maybe that's not the thing you're doing. And later lectures, we'll talk about something like Nietzsche's Eternal Return of the Saint, which is kind of like a thought experiment to help us try to see who we really are, okay? What we really want from life. And in some way, I think that's what's going on here with Sartre. We bear the responsibility not just for ourselves, but when I make a choice about what human beings are and what I believe in, I'm making a choice for all mankind. But I think we need to think about it as a metaphorical kind of approach to it. Though, in some passages, he does seem to be that, when I choose for myself, I choose for all men. He is literal about that as well. But I don't think he means I'm supposed to come here and force you to be a philosopher now. I think it's a way you are supposed to go about it, see how big and how much a burden this responsibility is. This is probably one of the most difficult parts, I think, in the essay altogether, to really grasp, okay? Now, once I understand that there is this responsibility on me, not only for myself to choose who I am, but for all mankind, I have a deep sense of burden, okay? Of burden and responsibility, okay? And this responsibility, I believe, as Sartre says, leads us to some fundamental moods that we encounter as we realize who we are as subjectivity and responsible for all, okay? It leads us to what I call fundamental moods, which are three of the ones he describes here in the essay. The first one is anguish, then forlornness, and despair. And it doesn't mean that one leads to the other. We could feel all three of these at once, okay? Or maybe perhaps sometimes one does lead to the other. A lot of times he seems to show that anguish and forlornness go hand in hand, and maybe despair is something after. But either way, I think all three are possible at once. It doesn't necessarily all lead to the other, okay? But can be thought together. He says the first thing when we realize this responsibility is the anguish. Because not only do I have to choose for all mankind, there is no proof of value, okay? I don't know what to choose. No proof, okay, of value. And the point is this, okay? When I make my choice about my life, there is no thing that I can look to anymore to say, oh, well, here is the place I can look to find out what I'm really supposed to do. Or here's a place I'm supposed to look at. He points out I could go to my parents and say, what do my parents want me to do? Okay, I could do that. I could go to my priest. What does my priest want me to do? I can go to my philosophy professor. What does my philosophy professor want me to do? But in the end, all these places I could look to for to find out what value is, what I should value in my life, the thing is, who has to decide who to believe in? Okay? Is it my parents? Is it my priest? Is it God? Is it the philosophy teacher? Is it someone else? That all falls back on you. You have to make the choice. In the essay, he talks about the old woman who hears God and thinks it's God on the telephone. Now, it could be God. It might not be. She could be schizophrenic, all those things. But in the end, Sartre wants to point out, it is her choice to believe in what those things are. No matter what the case is, she has to choose which one to believe in. There is no proof of value out there. And this is the whole point. We cannot know, even if there was a purpose for us out there. It's impossible because of the situation we're in. We're thrown into this world. We are existence precedes essence. We have to choose on our own. And that brings anguish or anxiety. To use Kierkegaard's ideas, anxiety is fear of something which I do not know. Okay? I do not know if this is the right choice. I will not know if this is the one I'm supposed to be. And the problem is, I still have to choose. Okay? There's no way of knowing what that is, and I have to maybe make that leap anyway. You always have to choose. And Sartre wants to point out, even not choosing is still making a choice. Okay? So that brings anxiety. What should I choose? What should I do? Okay? This is backed up, I think, by forlornness. And what we have to kind of understand is we have to realize all the consequences of the death of God. Okay? All the consequences. Okay? This is of death of God. Okay? We have to realize all the consequences of the death of God. And what he means basically is this: if there is no God, or put it this way, if you cannot ever know if there was one, all right? You have to realize that all the ways in which we have valued things in our life, all the things we put value into, no longer can be thought of in the same way. If we used to believe in some type of transcendental idea which would give us value, some type of this thing says this is what you should believe in, or this is what you should value over this. Without God or some transcendental idea telling us this, if this is no longer the ways in which we go around valuing life, if we use those things, no longer we can value that in that way any longer. So the moral systems based in some type of godly ideas or the transcendental ideas must be gone too. And what forlornness really means, it's almost like a scorn. Something's been taken from me that I want it. I do have it's to back up the point. There is no way I could ever know what is valuable and what isn't. I am scorned. As much as hard as I try, I want to know, does this mean something or does this mean something? I cannot. So not only am I have this anguish and anxiety about what should I do, I also have this sense of almost scornness or forlornness of something being ripped from me, my ability to even figure out what I should value or not. Okay? This will eventually lead to the idea, or actually before I get to despair, Sartre uses a quote, I think I really want to put it here, is that we are condemned to freedom, that we are totally free. We have to make a choice about everything, including what we value. It is the human being which creates the value. And that is all it could ever come from. It doesn't come from anywhere else, and we have to understand that. And the thing is, that is a very anxious-ridden and forlorn decision when we do that. I love that idea that we're condemned to freedom. It also means that there is no excuses. That doesn't matter. Even if you were, as we'll see here in despair, we talk, even if you're born in the wrong neighborhood or something like this, you still have a choice, and it's up to you to determine what is valuable or not. As we'll see, we still have freedom within this. We're not totally constructed by our society. No excuses here, okay? So we have this anxious-ridden, forlorn decision we were making. It also eventually leads to despair. And there's two kind of processes of this I want to talk about. The first one, I'm going to borrow a term from Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, and use this idea of facticity he brings in. One thing we have to realize is human beings are factical, that they live in a factual world. Certain things can happen and certain things cannot happen, okay? I may want to be a Spanish New World explorer. The problem is, there is no more New World to explore, and there is no Spanish New World explorers, okay? There are certain facts about my life that I just can't do. When the essay talks about wanting to meet his friend who's coming in on a train, he's got some other things to do, and the train's late. He can't wait for the train, but he needs to sit there or be late for his other thing. What can he do? Well, he can't make the train come. It's not going to happen. The point is, I am limited. There is a certain sphere of possibilities which I have, limited by my factical situation. But what we need to remind ourselves is those possibilities don't control us. We get to choose among those, okay? So there is this level of choice, though those possibilities are definitely real factical possibilities, okay? They are facts of it. The other part, which is despairing, that I can't be whatever I want, I'm still stuck within a range of possibilities. The other part is, even when I choose, it doesn't end, okay? It's not like I go and make my choice and go, okay, I've made my choice, I've said this is what's valuable. For me, I'm a philosopher now. It's not like this ends. What the point is the despairing part of this is this continues. We still have to make choices in my life. I still have to make more career decisions. I still have to decide whether to be married or not to be married, or is this what I want, or is that what I want? And this will continue until I'm dead, okay? And that can be despairing, that we might not ever get to a point, or as Sartre said, we will never get to a point in where this is like completed. We no longer feel this anxious or forlornness or despair. Now, there may get to points where we cover it over and where we're not aware of it, but he thinks it is always there. And when we make choices, in all choices it's there, but we make those really extreme choices, the ones about our life that are really deeply meaningful to us, that is when these things seem to really awaken in us. And he believes, really believe he thinks these are fundamental moods of who we are, okay? So we have our anguish and our forlornness and finally despair. Now, this was a little pessimistic, right? He's trying to get out of it. But I think what we have to see is that the optimism in this, and going back to this idea, that despite all these things that are around us, despite how anxious-ridden this is, and how despairing this is, and how it is difficult to kind of grasp who we are if we don't have this purpose given to us. But think of the freedom that we have now to decide who you are. Think how optimistic that is that no one can decide what you are except for you. This really reminds me of Nietzsche's quote, to become who you are. He said, well, obviously I'm going to become whoever I am, right? But what he meant by that is that you are in charge of making who you are. Even when there are social pressures on you, you still have that choice. You have that responsibility. And no one else is responsible for yourself other than you. And I think there's a lot of that, excuse me, I don't want to use the word value here, right? Because you're choosing what that value is. But I think there's something really great about that idea and very optimistic that we, even though in our situation may be the way it is, we still have control over it. And it's up to us. No excuses, okay? that idea that I'm condemned to freedom sounds horrible, in some sense, because I'm condemned to it, but I think I'd rather be condemned to freedom than condemned to being some type of object in the mind of God, or something else in which I have no control about who I am, that I am determined to be what I am before I ever come into existence. And I think that's how Sartre would definitely want to look at it. Okay? Now, I know this was a quick lecture. We had to kind of get through it fast for time's sake online. But if you have any questions, please email me, and I will see you next time on these lectures. I believe we'll be talking about Kierkegaard. So, a great lecture there. I'll see you next time on my philosophical lecture shorts. Have a good one. Thank you. Today, we're going to be talking about a really quick lecture on Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist. And in particular, we're going to talk about his definition of existentialism in his essay, The Humanism of Existentialism. Okay? And one of the big things that Sartre wanted to do when writing that essay was to try to kind of defend existentialism against many of the criticism it had, as well as finally give a really good definition to what it was. Many people kind of avoided the term, they didn't like using the term about it, but Jean-Paul Sartre came along and said, you know what, I'm going to be the existentialist, here's what it is. In doing that, though, he wanted to defend it against some criticisms that perhaps the existentialism was more of an elitist philosophy, only one that you would talk about in the classroom, one that doesn't apply to outside. As we'll see, existentialism has to deal explicitly with the real world outside. That's what he wanted you to know. The other thing is, he wants to defend it against the criticism that it's only about human degradation and despair and all these things. And though there are some dark things here, as you'll see, despair is written up over there as an important part of the theory, it's actually a very optimistic theory he wants to point out. It's not a pessimistic theory, it's an optimistic one. And the big thing he wants us to know is, of course, there is always choice. And this is one of his big ideas, that we always have a choice to be what we are. Okay? And that's the he want to show us kind of the ways in which that has happened, and the ways in which why that is so wrong. Okay? So let's put an X here and put what it's not, which is we are not, in essence precedes existence like many have thought before. And he wants to show us this place of what that would be. What would it be to be essence precedes existence? And hopefully by example, we can then show what it actually means to be the opposite of existence precedes essence. Okay? The first thing he says, well, we can think of ready-at-hand objects. Okay? So that's what I call them here. I'm borrowing a term from Heidegger here. Ready-at-hand objects. Those things, okay, are essence precedes existence. In the writing, he talks about a paper cutter. Okay? And he says it would be ridiculous to think about making a paper cutter before knowing what it is, what its purpose is. Okay, you know, the inventor of the paper cutter doesn't create the paper cutter and then goes, what the hell do I use that for? Okay, or someone didn't invent, let's put it away, a chair. Okay, someone didn't come up with a chair before and they go, I made this chair here, now what am I supposed to do with it? The thing is, the purpose in mind is already there. The essence, here we go, the essence of what the thing is exists prior to the creation of it, before its existence. In the book, the paper cutter, here in this other example, the chair, right? Ready-at-hand objects are, essence precedes existence. Some other places, and now we get to where the human being is thought like this, we can see it as God as creator. Okay? Optimism side. I guess the best way to start this is to define existentialism, how he does it. And he does it in a very simple way. He says, existentialism is existence precedes essence. Precedes essence. Okay? Now, quickly we can say what that basically means is I exist before I have what I am. Okay? The best way I think to go about explaining this, though, is to do the same process Sartre does, which is kind of a negative process, where he basically says that this is what the human being is, but up until this point, typically Western philosophy has thought of the human being as the opposite of this, that actually thought of us as an essence precedes existence.